Let me quickly inform the audience the topic, the panel discussion topic. The panel discussion is the last panel discussion for the day for the Kuwait Summit. The topic is futuristic, resilient data center and cloud-centric digital platforms. And the moderator for this panel is Mr. Khalil. He is the CEO, IT Solution and Financial Facilities NetLab, and he is from Lebanon. So over to you, Mr. Khalil. The stage is yours. Please share the panel.
I'm very sorry, but I don't have anything on my hand here. So what to share with you, sorry.
Okay, no problem. So I hope you have the questions handy, which Jackson.
Sure, I have the questions. I have the question with me, and when it's my time, I will ask the question directly.
Okay, definitely. We can start with the panel, Khalil. I think this is the time.
Sure, Mr. Khalil, maybe a quick introduction about yourself, and then probably you can put this.
Excellent. Excellent. It's better to tell me what to do. So I am a software engineer, a telecom engineer as well. I took my MBA from Lebanon, the University of Kaslik. And also I have some very special diploma from Switzerland for the crypto and encryption data communication between faxes, between landlines and mobile communication system. And also I am a consultant for the Tetra communication system, the radio frequency communication system for all Europe. So I am their consultant and the representative in the Middle East and Africa. And I have a company for networking financial. And as well, I am the CIO at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Lebanon since 1996. We already made and established the VPN, the virtual private network between our Lebanese embassies abroad, around 90 embassies. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have a very closed network, secure network. And now, due to the critical situation and the critical economical situation in Lebanon and the instability of the politics in Lebanon, so we face a very good challenge that we have a lot of engineers and a lot of expertise in Lebanon, but the difference in the currency, we face the problem on that to continue and to support such situations. So that's why I create like a consortium of IT companies in Lebanon, and we are working as outsourcing with some special projects in Europe, in Africa, in Middle East, in US, in Canada, and Australia. So that can help the Lebanese company to stay in Lebanon, to support, to face this economic crisis, and also it will be easy for us to penetrate the foreign the foreign market. Why? Because due to the low cost we have in Lebanon, as I think it's similar to India right now. They made the outsourcing for the other countries. So now we are brothers with India, and we are similar, and we are partners. And that's what we are doing now in Lebanon, really to support. But I follow the first presentation, and now also concerning the hybrid and the security, and especially with Mr. Muhammad from Kuwait. So we have, as I am in the government since 25 years, we faced a very, very serious problem, especially in the government in the Middle East. And I think maybe in the Arab countries. They have a mentality and a knowledge that we can't trust and believe in private sectors. So how we can go for clouding solution and clouding emails and clouding database and putting our database abroad. So, and without having a direct manage and control and monitoring on it. Because the mentality said that if I don't see my database behind of me, I can't trust where it is. And it's very, very old mentality, and we face really a very serious problem for that. For example, the Office 365, since few years it is active. We can't go for it as a government because the emails are outside, are not on our exchange, on our server, physical data center. And so that's why all what you can say about hybrid, about security, about encryption, you as expert and Mrs. Shalini as expert can understand, and Mr. Muhammad can understand that and can believe in that. But you can't convince politics and administrators that are in the government that it is the trend and that it is the right solution for us, and we can cost and we can minimize the cost and we can avoid putting a lot of monies and losing our data. So that's why I think that we have to create a very, I think, very advanced policy between the private sectors and the public sectors in a way to secure or to convince them or to calm them or to give them a proof that your data are secure, your data are, it's not with public, it's not spreading, it's not displaying wherever. So it's not disclosing wherever. So I think it's a very good challenge for us. So that's why in brief, and sorry for taking all the time.
Thank you, Mr. Khalil. Thank you so much for the brief introduction there and the insights that you provided. So would you want to introduce the other panelists, Shalini?
Your voice is mute, Shalini. Please unmute your voice.
Okay, thank you very much. So Mr. Khalil, again, thank you very much for sharing the insights on cloud, specifically the cloud scenario in Lebanon right now. And without wasting much time, I would like to introduce our panelists, the very first panelists, in fact. So I would like to have Mr. Vasudevan Nair. He is the head IT and the Chief Information Security Officer from Writer Corporation. The stage is yours, Mr. Nair, and I would request you to take a minute or two to introduce yourself as well. And Mr. Khalil will ask you your respective question. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Khalil, for a nice introduction, and also Shalini. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. Right? Mr. Khalil has touched upon a lot of points in terms of data security, right? Those points are relevant in terms of not only for government, but also for private enterprises also, right? So data security has become a very serious kind of challenge as of now. India is also coming up with a lot of regulations and laws, in this direction. So there are certain bills which are pending in front of the parliament to be passed. So once we pass all those regulations, I think the data security governance would be at par with the GDPR kind of governance and all. So, one aspect which has been mentioned by Khalil is the geo aspect of it. Most of the nations are concerned about the data going out, right? What to be done on those fields. So first of all, how will we identify where exactly is the data located, right? So the government regulations are one of the area that that will actually define all these things. But as a security practitioner, as an infra practitioner, we also has a wrong kind of responsibility to understand where exactly the applications are hosted and how the data is being hosted in the environment. What is the kind of architecture that we are having? Do we have a hybrid kind of environment? And what are the kind of protective mechanisms and controls that we deploy? Right. So there are various frameworks that we could discuss about, in terms of controlling this thing. Starting from ISO 27001 to whatever framework that we described. Right. So all these frameworks would actually help us in terms of putting some sort of some sort of thing, controls, right? Some sort of controls there. But more than that, I think the most important aspect is to identify what is the criticality of your data. Maybe this may be a very simple thing that I may be telling you as the data classification, right? So starting from the data classification, right? And then you put controls on top of all this data, right? And then then you put all the controls, like in the hybrid kind of environment. So if you're working with a multi-cloud kind of environment, or a hybrid along with the native kind of data centers, so your control should be unique, or your control should be working with all the cloud service providers. So now I would like to mention one more aspect of it, is the standardization aspect of it, right? So various cloud service providers are working with their own kind of interfaces, their own kind of infra. So the security team as well as infrastructure team is facing a lot of challenges in terms of understanding all those technology. If you touch upon the skill set aspect of it, right, you may be facing a lot of challenges in terms of identifying the skill set and hiring them. So these are the general kind of aspects that I would like to touch upon. And going forward, I would like to, and I'm happy to answer whatever questions that you people have, or maybe Khalil have. Now, over to you, Khalil, please.
Sir, I understand you. As if I got you, the problem is in two things. You said, where is our data hosted, or where is the place of our data, or what are the main concern for our data? So our concern are in two places, in two ways, or in two things: the mails, the emails that you have to send and receive from both sides, and this first. Second, the data concerning the CRM, corresponding management system, the workflow, the document management system, DMS, the transactions and operations between, let's say, our embassies abroad and the ministry. So you have to make the transactions over the internet. So that's why you have to locate your data in a place to be secured and encrypted. So if we are going to the normal way and to the traditional way to have a data center and to make all the security, the IPS, the firewalls, all the security on your data, it's not only an antivirus, as Mr. Muhammad said before. It's only for all the data to encrypt and to secure your data. So in this case, you will pay a lot of money. So to minimize and to go to the hybrid and to the cloud solution. So this is the solution that's not accepted by the public sectors, especially in our region. I don't know if I answered you, my friend.
That's a common concern. It's a common concern across governments. We could understand that. But when it comes to technology, evolution, right, or maybe technology adoption, the government sector data centers are not. So don't take me wrong for this statement. So not as adequate as the innovations that cloud service providers are doing. So that's a reality. So if we talk about Amazon, what Amazon is doing, what Azure is doing, or what GCP is doing, right? So somehow I feel that government also should take leverage out of all these technologies, right? And the concern here is, if the concern here is the data, then we should rather think about protective mechanisms and controls than that of than that of the providers, right? And also the other point mentioned by you is also relevant, the geo aspect of it, right? Data should be within the country, and what are the how you would to put those regulations. The provider is a US centric provider or maybe some other country centric provider. So how will you enforce the law? So that is also a big concern among governments. So we need to address all those challenges, but encryption can play a major role here, right? So irrespective of the location, if you have a strong kind of encryption, which you could confidently say that, okay, this cannot be decrypted, even if we have a quantum computer, right? Kind of 1 qubit kind of quantum computer. So that should be the level of encryption government should adopt to secure the data.
Yes, you are right. You are right. We need to make this security. You are right. Absolutely, you are right. And it's very important for us to make such security and such encryption.
Yeah, I think we can go to other panelists also, and then we can come again and continue the discussion on these areas, right?
Yes.
Sure. Yes, Mr. Khalil. So yeah, we in fact would move to Mr. Joe Barakat. Let's have a quick talk or maybe discussion on challenges we face to keep the data center online and safe. Your thoughts on this, Joe?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. I am the Chief Information Officer of a multi-million-dollar group of companies here in Lebanon. Our main activities are oil and gas. We also have convenience stores distributed all around the country at the stations. I just would like to address a small comparative between having an on-premise data center and having this data center on the cloud. As Mr. Khalil was saying that currently we are facing a lot of problems here in Lebanon concerning the infrastructure of the all over. Let me point to some small points. To keep the data center alive, okay, is the headache of all directors or manager in the IT. I think that everyone will agree with me, because we have some uncontrolled interruptions here in Lebanon in the main infrastructures. These can lead to a total loss of services at all levels, and you will find yourself facing hundreds of people unable to continue their daily tasks and businesses, is losing money because of this fact that it's not in your hands. I'm going to give you just a small example. A couple of years ago, due to some work on the public infrastructure just beside our building, we had an interruption on the main backbone that connects our data center to the internet. They literally cut off our backbone. So we had to add additional investment and install a parallel wireless standby backbone just to bypass this issue. Here in Lebanon, we have another issue. We have a power issue. We have a constant cut in the electricity. So to keep the data center alive, you have to have dual generators with their maintenance, dual UPS and the maintenance, dual everything. And you should even have power regulators to regulate powers, because electricity is the main key for electrical equipment to survive.
Or no more fuel, Mr. Joe, or no more fuel.
Yes, well, I'm not speaking about this, but hope that we will not come into this point, hoping. Moreover, you have the security. You have the constant changes in security models as cybersecurity is becoming a must in the network. Hacking is becoming a business for a lot of people. You pay money just to hack your competition, just to interrupt their businesses. And this is a trend is becoming on the internet. Moreover, the duplication of hardware, firewalls, servers, switches, and the list can continue. On top of all, you need qualified IT and non-engineers to support and maintain all these complexities. You have to have this, or your business will interrupt. If I want all these factors, if I'm going to wrap all these factors, okay, this will lead enterprise to invest a lot in their IT infrastructures, and I have high operating expenses values in their P&Ls. So if I want to conclude, I think that once the enterprises, especially here in Lebanon and in the Arab countries, they can bypass the cloud security barriers for data that you all mentioned about this. Okay, I think that they should, without any hesitation, move to the cloud, because if they compare the operating expenses to manage all these complexities that I already spoke about versus the cloud subscription, they will definitely find that they have a cutoff in their expenses, and it's nothing comparing. I hope that I made a small brief and it was clear. I'm ready for any questions if anyone.
Sure, thanks so much there, Joe, for that introduction, and also a brief about keeping the data safe. We have Mr. Jackson, okay, who is the Vice President Cybersecurity for Adani Group. Mr. Jackson, your take or your views when it comes to, you know, keeping you know, the data online and safe.
Thank you very much, Naveen. Thank you for the opportunity, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. This is indeed a bit of a surprise because I'm seeing one familiar face in the crowd that I have. Good to see you, Ibrahim. I worked with Ibrahim a long time ago, nearly a decade ago in Kenya. So it's a wonderful surprise. Thank you. My experience is a bit all over the place. So I've worked in the Middle East. I've been to Lebanon a few times. Beirut is a wonderful city to be in. I've also worked in Africa, traveling over 17 countries over there. So it has given me quite a bit of an exposure. So thank you very much for having me. With regards to, telecom was an area of expertise for me for the last 10 years or so, more than 10 years actually. And recently moved to a lot of allied business interests. Now, coming back to the question as far as taking data online, I'll talk at it from a perspective of both the Middle East region and the global perspective around it. In the Middle East, I can tell you instances where I've actually stepped into meetings where either regulators or somebody says that, because I was working in a telecom, so they were very, oh, no, you cannot take the data online, you know, this is very critical data. And the same regulator, you ask them, where is your email? Oh, on 0365. I'm sorry. So as a regulator, you can take your data all the way up to the cloud, but as as one of the companies that operates under your aegis, I cannot take data outside. This seems a little, counterintuitive to the person asking the question, this doesn't make sense. But I think that mentality has shifted in the Middle East. I can speak more closely from the perspective of, let's say, Kuwait, because I've spent a lot of time in Kuwait, and also, let's say, if it is Bahrain and all, and especially with Bahrain being host to the Amazon data center that's come up. So that particular shift has helped a lot of countries. Now, taking data to the cloud, one thing is very clear, unless you are operating your organization like a well-oiled Fortune 50 company, you are going to lack on certain security practices around data security. For this reason alone, you have to look at the options available out there and see what it is. However, I think one of the classic mistakes a lot of organizations make is that they assume because I put it on the cloud, it's secure now. In fact, if we just look back at the 6 months of data breaches, what we will realize is that most of the data breaches have been from the cloud. So why is it that everybody touts about the security on the cloud, but at the same time, we are leaking information like crazy from the cloud? This is because of how we have deployed it. It's not about whether or not we need to go to the cloud. We have to go to the cloud. That is my belief. Having said that, it is how you go to the cloud. What are the responsibilities across the service provider and the service consumer? What have you baked into the contract? Because you can scream your lungs out, but if it's not in the contract, they don't have to do anything for you. So these are some of the considerations that one has to take when moving to the cloud. As far as data center resilience and redundancy is concerned, I think there is a distinction to be made between both of them. And that understanding has to be there because, especially like a fellow panelist, Joe mentioned, you could, he suffered this interruption. I'm sure there has been a detailed, CAPA around it, corrective action, preventive action. How do we prevent ourselves being in this situation again, kind of thing. So I think these are the topics that, the questions that organizations in the region have to ask themselves before they move to the cloud, not after, or before they build the required resiliency, not after. Back to you, Nabil.
Yes, thanks so much there. Thanks so much there, Jackson. Of course, your view was interesting. And yeah, moving on to the next panelist, Mr. Ibrahim. Thank you so much for joining in, Ibrahim. So let me just give a quick, introduction about Ibrahim with his current role. So there you go, Ibrahim. Okay, just a second, I just missed it. Okay, Ibrahim Gutungo, okay, the head of information cybersecurity policy regulations from Standard Chartered Bank. Yeah, so there were a few questions which was put across. So let me quickly understand from you, Ibrahim, in terms of how are companies responding to EBA outsourcing and cloud guidelines. The PRA outsourcing and cloud guidelines, etc. Just want to hear a bit more on this from you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for the introduction. Nice to meet everybody on the panel and also all the distinguished guests that are watching us. So thanks for the invite. So definitely, at the moment, my role is slightly different from my background. So I have a fairly technical background, seeing that I worked with Jackson in a telecom company, and before that in other sort of banking and telecom companies as well. But I think over and above that, at the moment, the focus on compliance is quite heavy on a lot of companies. We are seeing left, right, and center data breaches triggering a lot of punitive measures from regulators. You remember Marriott, who are significantly fined in the US and also in Europe because of some of the data breaches that they went through, also British Airways and so on. So I think in response to those kinds of breaches, so the two regulators, European Banking Association, as well as the PRA for financial services, actually put out two big obligations for financial sector. And this cut across quite a number of entities. They cut across the third parties that issue those services to banks, as well as their fourth parties. But one interesting thing is that they expect that companies issue the same level of compliance to third parties as their internal arrangements as well. So say you're a group company and you have subsidiaries and you have your data center within, which is hosted at the group level. The SLAs, the contracts that you give to your subsidiaries should be handled in exactly the same way as your third party SLAs and contracts. So this is quite an interesting change and move from the regulator. So it means that now compliance in terms of data residency will be much more scrutinized by such regulators. It means that if you have any interface to financial services in terms of payments, or even just services hosting data that belongs to financial sector, then that will be under the scrutiny of such regulators going forward. So I think they've given about a year for companies to comply, which means reviewing all your third-party connections, looking at the types of services that you have there, the information assets that those third parties actually manage, and whether those touch on such services. And it's an interesting one, because even for you as a customer, you would want to know whether your data is being processed properly when you go to your bank. So if that is, transacted through some international products, and then you get your eventual investment dividends, you would want to know that the information that you give to your bank is securely managed. So I think it's both empowering to customers, but also to companies, it is a move in the right direction on risk management. So I think the question maybe to the wider team here is, how are these obligations affecting the Middle East? How are they affecting the companies that you work for? Have you guys thought about a strategy to comply to such regulations, which might, in future have some punitive measures if they are not complied to? Thanks.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you there for the insights. Yes, Mr. Khalil.
Yes, I am here, please.
Mr. Khalil, yes, sir. So do you have any questions for the panelists? I mean, that can be, asked and probably can be answered.
Yes, please. Yes, please. I have two questions mainly. So the first question is, what are the challenges in achieving resiliency?
Well, I think that's for Mr. Vasudevan. Who do you want to point this out to, Mr. Khalil? Or is it open for all the panelists?
Yes, it is open. Who is caring to answer? It's very important.
I think I can start answering this. And as per me, the main challenge is, first of all, let us understand what exactly is resiliency means in a sense. Resiliency means how soon you could recover, right? Rather than redundancy, right? Redundancy, you are provisioning, extra resource. But resiliency in the sense how soon you could identify and recover. So the visibility comes a big challenge, right? When it comes to cloud environment, visibility, I could say that it's a big challenge. We all have native kind of data center practices, right? So native data center, more or less, it is under our control. It's the perimeter has been secured, and we know what is happening inside the perimeter, and so what needs to be exposed outside the perimeter, right? So it's a pretty good control can be implemented when it comes to native data centers. But if you have a hybrid or multi-cloud kind of environment, then you may have to collect all this data to understand that what is happening in there. And that depends upon the cloud service provider also, what they are exposing. And again, Jackson mentioned a few points in terms of implementation, maybe the configurations, right? So have we done it right? That is the question that needs to be asked by the most of the infra as well as security teams, right? So how frequently you are actually auditing it, and to understand the configuration changes, how you are managing the change. So all those things are certain challenges in this region. Then one thing that I personally experienced is so when it comes to visibility, you have to work with a lot of data. Data in the sense, I'm not talking about the normal business data. I'm talking about the data which has been continuously generated, when it comes to logs or events, security events. So all this data you need to go and analyze to understand, what exactly is the remedial action that you need to take, right? So I think now AI or ML kind of technologies can greatly help in terms of avoiding a lot of false positives, right? So that the efficiency of the security teams or maybe the infra teams can be improved. I think that is another challenge, because you won't get ready-made applications to integrate all those things, right? The integration aspect needs to be done by the in-house teams, or maybe if you are outsourcing it to a vendor, then they have to integrate and they have to take all this data and some sort of meaning out of that data, right? So that is exactly very important. And then another problem that I could mention is the OpEx cost, right? So most of the companies are trying to reduce the OpEx cost while they're driving to increase efficiency. So there should be a balance between efficiency versus the OpEx cost. So in native data centers, we know that what needs to be deployed. So mostly it's one-time capex investment followed by some sort of OpEx spend. But now in cloud, it's the OpEx cost which is actually hitting the companies, right? So during this pandemic times, most of the companies are facing these kind of challenges, and pushing the teams to IT teams to reduce the OpEx cost. So how will you reduce it, without impacting the performance? So that is another challenge that I could mention. Over to you, Mr. Naveen or Khalil.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I have another question. If you allow me to ask it, please. Do I have a time?
Sure. Yes, you can. But before that, if Mr. Jackson or Mr. Joe or Ibrahim have anything to add or object or
okay,
resilience.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Nothing to object to it, but I would like to add a few points to this. When we talk about cloud, what is the understanding is we are going to a service provider. Let's be very clear about that. So when we talk about service provider, we are talking about SLAs. What are your SLAs that you're going to define? That is going to be driven mostly by the nature of the business that you have. It doesn't mean that if the neighboring company has taken an SLA, I will take the same SLA. No, you might not need it. You need to take the SLAs that is pertinent to your business. Now, for example, I mean, the question has been, okay, Ibrahim raised a good point with regards to regulatory impact also. The question is, today I've taken a cloud. I love it. I'm happy with it and everything. I have an incident at the cloud provider's site. He has done a DR. Usually all of them do. In how much time? That's going to be an SLA you're going to define as an organization. In how much time will the cloud service provider move to DR so that your business is not interrupted? Now, let's say what happens if this DR is in another country. All of a sudden, you are not compliant to the data residency rules that your regulator may have given you. These are nuances that one has to get into in these details when you talk to your cloud service provider. So again, the point being that we are talking about resiliency, not just redundancy. I mean, we could make a data center completely redundant to end, every equipment mirrored, and it still wouldn't be as resilient. The simple reason is because that data center goes down, that's it, you've lost operation. Resilient anymore. So I think that clear distinction has to be there. And when we switch over, where are we going to
I think we need to mute Naveen, the back end.
Sure.
So
yes, Mr.
The point I was making was that these are the considerations you will have to take in when you strike a deal with your cloud service provider, whether it's encryption also. We talked about data encryption. on the cloud? Possible. Who's holding the keys? Is it going to be held by the cloud provider? Are you going to hold the keys for it? You know, and off the bat, when a provider tells you that, oh, we are, HIPAA compliant, we are PCI DSS compliant, it just means that they have the capability for it. You will still have to do the work around it also. So it doesn't automatically, a certification doesn't translate to automatic this thing. Because one of the problems that a lot of IT functions have in an organic growth is that we start spreading data out. Somebody asked for, who are the employees in my company? I send an Excel sheet or an access with employee name, his birth date, his location, his address, every little detail in there. That was never requested, that was never asked. But now all of a sudden, we shared all that data. I think we are at a cusp, especially within the Middle East region, we are at a cusp where a regulatory hammer is going to come down. In the sense that all of the countries are talking about data privacy. And it's happening throughout the world, even in India, even in the Middle East. And it's already there. The problem is that everybody asks this question: what's the worst that will happen if the regulator chooses to fine you? Well, after the first 2 fines, you will come to me. Because you can tell that the law says that if you break the signal, a red signal, you will be fined $100. But you don't know, that's the law right now. But once the police catches you, he might throw you in jail for a night. He might take $100 and plus $150. You will come to impact to your business after an incident. Before that, it's all guesstimate to that extent. So I think resiliency is not only about operations continuing, but the security with which it continues has to be taken while taking into consideration the regulatory aspect. Back to you, Naveen.
Sure, thanks so much, Jackson. And anything to be added, Joe or Ibrahim?
In fact, Naveen, I'm so sorry, Joe, you were saying something?
No.
Okay, in fact, I have a question by one of our delegates for Ibrahim. Ibrahim, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much. So Ibrahim, I have a question by one of our participants, delegates for you. Since you are heading the cybersecurity policy regulation of Standard Chartered in UK. So attackers are already using AI. So your thoughts on that and how to safeguard data on enterprise level? And if you could just throw some light on some of the top trends around data centers in UK, if you can, that would be great.
Sure. So I think in my work, I oversee about 60 countries in terms of regulations. So those 6 countries cut across, I guess, the Americas, Asia, Middle East and Africa, and also Europe. And I think recently, in the last maybe 1 or 2 years, there's been a lot of regulation that has been issued around the space for AI. So I think in Hong Kong, the HKMA have issued a regulation called, I think, Business Development in AI. And also the MAS regulator have issued one called, I think, FITS, which is on fairness, accountability, and so on. So the main purpose of some of this obligation is to avoid discrimination, to avoid artificial intelligence being used beyond the initial set functionality that it's meant for. So they've gone ahead to issue guidelines around governance and accountability at senior manager level, where if any of the AI that you implement ends up in a situation where it either does not accommodate certain demographic of your customers, like you remember Apple Face ID did not recognize people who had a dark complexion, and that was a big issue for them. They were even taken to court for that. Or AI which is used for querying information past a privacy perspective, where things like Google, the Google Home mode or Alexa listening devices were recording information even without being queried by the customer. So some of these backend AI algorithms have created data breaches where they were not intended to, And that's why regulators have been quite keen on implementing regulations that oversee breaches that are not intended, number one, but also those that might be intentional from some of these companies with a view of protecting the customer and the citizen for some of the countries where those are issued. But over and above that, in terms of data center usage, I think there's a lot of use of AI for reporting and statistics. So I'll not regurgitate what other panelists have already spoken about. I think Vasudevan and also Jackson talked about a little bit of that, where companies want to go on the cloud, but regulators are a little bit behind on the adoption of risk management mitigation for companies that want to go out on the cloud, but they actually have restrictions for certain kinds of data not to be hosted on the cloud. So I think the businesses have to be really smart on how they do this. And I think the UK has given a lot of companies solutions. So if you look at companies like Rackspace, who have a very good data center framework, have been able to give solutions to a lot of companies who want to do offshore hosting of applications that comply with EU regulation, as an example. And then they manage for you all that back-end compliance by engaging a third party that can give you a compliance report. And that compliance report is issued to multi-tenants who subscribe to their services. So I think Jackson and I saw some of these quite being used quite effectively, where you go to companies like IBM and they will give you a report which is quite detailed. That report is a compliance report stating all the different controls that have been rolled out to protect data, to protect the services that are being issued, but also to protect the products that the company has so that they are not hacked into. So I think the bigger concern at the moment is breaches that come in from third parties. So I think that's a theme since we heard of SolarWinds hack, which was done recently. I think you remember a while back, there was the Target hack that was in the US, where the hacker came in through a UPS or a utility tool into the company. So those kinds of threats are becoming material to companies. Regulators are requesting for companies to assess their third parties, to look at materiality of the services that they offer back into their company. And if these specific third parties, or maybe a set of them, go down where the services are breached, their services are no longer available, how does that play on to availability of your services back to your customers? So I think the main concern that we are seeing at the moment is that supply chain attack is coming to light more. Ransomware of small entities, a company that might, a law firm, for example, which handles mergers and acquisitions for international companies. And if that law firm's data is held ransom, then you find a company in a situation where they now have a third-party risk that is passed on to them that is quite critical. And the board now is put to task on contractual requirements that should have been there to mitigate some of those kinds of risks. So I think, was it Joe who talked about, some of the resources that are thrown to such kinds of arrangements where, contracts have to be given the right level of scrutiny. They have to be given the right level of resources, even in terms of enforcing penalties to your third parties, and having clauses linked to your service level agreements, where if this third party breaches those agreements, then they incur certain penalties. So lastly, I think one of the other things that has been introduced recently is mandatory cyber insurance for third parties and cloud providers. So that cyber insurance is a protection for me as a company. So when I go out to a specific third party and I know at least there's a form of protection that I have because of the services that I offer to them. Quantification of that is a different question, and the whole metrics around the the criteria for determining the level of risk of that party is not something that's very mature for the insurance companies at this point. But that level of protection is something that can be complemented alongside your risk management when you're going out to third parties. So I think that's what I can contribute from my perspective, given the work that I do here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibrahim. That was extremely elaborate and very insightful for our delegates. And you did share a lot of critical information also. I'm sure our panelists and delegates and speakers have made their notes to implement whatever suggestions you have given. Thank you very much. And then I have one additional question from one of our delegates on basically a suggestion is what he's looking for. Suggestion on the data center protection against natural disaster, calamities, or let's say COVID. So if anybody can take this question and give some sort of suggestion to the delegates on data center protection against disasters, national disaster, natural disaster, or anything for that matter.
All right, I'll take a stab at it. See, the question of what the natural disaster is, see, if it is something like an earthquake or something along those lines, I think the data resiliency part of it, wherein your data center, you could have a DR data center, works out pretty decently. Of course, if you're with a cloud provider, again, I talked about the failover for a cloud provider, how you have built that in. It depends on that. Now, in smaller countries, of course, it's going to be difficult. You're not going to possibly have a DR within the same country. Let's say if I'm talking about, for example, Bahrain, or Kuwait for that matter, you probably will not have a DR within the same country simply because, let's say, your hybrid, your cloud service provider might not have a DR within the same. It has to be regional in that sense. However, there are other clauses which, if you talk about something like COVID, you're talking about pandemic. It's, I think, on a completely different level where you're talking about it. Now, again, you can try and enforce these things, but let's all be very cognizant of the fact that almost every contract nowadays has something called an act of God. So if that is what is going to get invoked, there's going to be quite a bit of legalese, which is, I think, outside the realm of the esteemed panelist over here, because you'll have to bring in the lawyers to actually make that take on whether or not I am going to treat this interruption as an act of God, and hence I'm going to suspend certain SLAs, for a duration of a time. However, what organizations can do is plan for that also. So, and this is where we've done this previously. I think maybe Ibrahim will remember. We do reduced SLAs for incidents like this. We say if you have an incident beyond your control or something, we are willing to accept reduced SLAs. So you need to have that take and feel to know, at what level are you willing to accept. So degradation of services in these kind of situations is something that you should mark out very clearly. Your business impact analysis has to be very clear to find out in which areas of my business process am I willing to take that hit, kind of thing. So I think that is going to be key about, what kind of natural disaster and how much you built into the contract with your service provider. Of course, if it's your own captive data center, do as much as you can. It depends on whether you can build 2 data centers. It depends on whether you can get people into data centers to continue the service when something like the COVID-19 hits, So this is going to be, there's a huge human aspect to this. I think I hope I've answered the question in some way.
Yes, you have, Jackson, and thank you so much again. Extremely insightful and helpful for our listeners. And
Alini, let me add a little bit, because Jackson talked about people there. I just wanted to hone on that a little bit. People should be the most important asset that companies do protect. Your data resilience when you go through the testing for that and the scenarios for testing data recovery or just data access for your different scenarios, will definitely assist when thinking about natural calamities that affect any company. So this typically seen as like a business continuity sort of activity when it touches on people. And I guess any company has to be ready to front any replacement resources for technical individuals to recover their systems. I think Musk was a very good example of a massive, breach that brought that company down for a month. I think the quantified loss that they mentioned was about $300 million that they went through because of not being online for a month. And it just boiled down to not enough IT people to recover the whole company. So just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Well, fantastic point added, Ibrahim. Thank you very much. That makes the panel discussion even more interactive and informative. Joe, Khalil, Vasudevan, would you like to add in here to what Jackson and Ibrahim just said?
Just before that, sorry to interrupt. So yeah, keeping a check on the time. So we've like almost about 55 minutes into the discussion. So yes, we would love to continue, go on. However, yeah, we have to end the session maybe in the next 5 minutes. So last few comments from each of the panelists would be highly appreciated. Just before.
Yes, just to bring the attention that at some point that Ibrahim was mentioning, the IoT devices that we install inside our networks, these are the most security breaches that we put, because these IoTs should to be working fine. They should be they have an internet access, and they constantly communicate with servers outside our local network. So so you don't have any restriction on these IoTs. So people, if you just put any IoT device without having the certification behind it, you could install a breach inside your network and having I don't know, as you put the hackers just inside your network just to play around. And this was a very important point just to point.
Vasudevan, Khalil, probably you may want to add something here before we wrap up the day.
I have one question, if you allow us to ask it, if it's more time.
Yes, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, how business could take leverage out of cloud to achieve more agility and resiliency? So I don't know who can answer it.
I'll try to answer that. So I think most of the areas we have briefly touched upon. Due to lack of time, I'll quickly touch upon 1 or 2 points more. Leveraging the total advantage out of cloud is not only infrastructure, right? So you should have your application architecture aligned with the cloud service providers architecture. So that is one key area that you have to focus on. So we know that most of the companies are still using the traditional monolithic kind of architecture applications, right, and legacy applications. So in those scenarios, if you're going to cloud with those kind of legacy applications, it won't give you the cost benefit that you are intended to. So it should be a transformation journey that you have to travel to redesign, re-architect your applications in terms of microservices architecture or maybe the containers of the world. So you have to slowly adopt towards those technologies, and then you have to plan and strategize your cloud journey. Maybe it may take more than a year to get there, right? But you have to have a long-term strategy carved out to reach there, right? And the strategy would definitely travel through multiple milestones in terms of re-architecting, in terms of aligning your CI/CD pipelines, right? DevOps, etc., etc. So there are a lot of areas that we still have to touch upon. We can keep on discussing like this now for the entire day, because it's a vast subject. When it comes to the cloud as well as the security, so it's a unique combination of subject, and any time is not adequate for this. So over to other panelists, because we are running out of time now.
Sure, great. Thank you so much, Mr. Vasudevan. Right, Mr. Khalil, you have something to add, or any last minute?
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much. But I agree totally with what Mr. Joe said about our infrastructure country, and this is what we face here. But thank you so much. No, I didn't have anything to add.
Thank you. Any last minute, maybe a quick, word from all of the panelists, maybe about 20-30 seconds each.
Jackson here. Thank you very much for having me. It was great to meet all the other leaders, and wonderful to connect with an old friend again. So thank you very much for having us. And I hope we have been able to enlighten, the larger audience with a bit on our take on how hybrid cloud and how data center resiliency should work. So thank you very much once again to KCC Summit, and to Naveen and to Shalini.
Thank you very much, Jackson. And thank you so much, Ibrahim, Vasudevan, Joe, Khalil, and of course, Naveen, to you as well. And let me just conclude the last day of the KCC 2021 Summit by thanking—
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And thank you each and every speaker who participated yesterday and today, and all the panelists and the delegates for sharing your insights, your questions, and joining us on both the days. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our partners, DR United Company, VMware, Microsoft, Manage Engine, KuwaitNet, and Petalinks, who added to the wonderful summit experience. Let me thank each one of you, everybody, all our delegates and partners, for giving us your precious time. And additionally, I request you all to visit the lounge area, and do not forget to explore the booths and connect with all our partners and see what they can do for you. Please book their appointments via the options that we have, via the option that Publio has given to us. Let's utilize the option. Thank you once again, Kuwait, for giving us this wonderful opportunity to host Kuwait Hybrid Cloud.
Shalini, do we have a cloud launch now?
Cloud? I'm sorry, what?
Cloud launch, because you are so far from you.
Yes, of course. So I would request you, Khalil, was that Khalil?
Sorry?
Was that Khalil?
Yes, Khalil.
Okay, Khalil, so I would request you that to go back at the lounge area, and
yes.
Please, reserve your slot.
We are waiting for the face-to-face events to happen. So definitely we would have lunch on, and maybe a cocktail reception in the evening if possible.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you all the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.